This story is titled, He's a Big Joke in Bed. My wife told her mom. So I let them laugh while I moved on with my life, and now she is begging. Hey everyone. Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. I, 34 male, never thought I'd be the guy writing one of these Reddit posts, but here I am. Been married to my wife, 32 female, for 6 years. Together for 9. I always considered myself a decent guy. Former college athlete, lacrosse, now working as a regional sales manager for a medical equipment company. Not the most exciting job, but it paid well enough for us to have a comfortable life in the suburbs. No kids, something she was always not ready for yet. Just us and our German Shepherd Max. Looking back, there were all the warning signs. But you know how it goes. You don't see the red flags when you're wearing rose-colored glasses. She came from money, I didn't. She had a master's degree, I had work experience. She had strong opinions about everything, and I just wanted a peaceful life. That dynamic established itself early, but I never really saw it as a problem. Marriage is about compromise, I told myself. But somehow I was always the one doing the compromising. We had a decent life on paper. Nice house in a good neighborhood, 2 cars in the garage, vacations twice a year, always to places she chose. Sex had become less frequent over the years, but I figured that was normal. When it did happen, it felt mechanical, like she was checking a box on her to-do list. I'd tried talking about it a few times, but she'd get defensive or say I was being needy, so eventually I just stopped bringing it up. It was a Friday night at my in-laws' place, one of those mandatory monthly dinners my wife insisted we attend. Her dad, 65 male, is actually a decent dude, retired military, always treated me with respect, taught me how to smoke meat properly. We'd talk sports or politics while my wife and her mom did their thing. But her mom, 62 female, complete nightmare. The kind of woman who criticizes everything from how you hold your fork to how you park your car. Nothing was ever good enough for her. Should have been my first clue about how my wife would turn out. That night seemed like any other. We'd finished dinner, some fancy salmon dish that her mom had spent the entire meal humble bragging about. My father-in-law had suggested watching the game, but my mother-in-law shot that down immediately with one of her looks. So instead, we were all gathered in the living room, making small talk about neighbors I'd never met, and people from my wife's childhood I couldn't care less about. I'd just stepped out to grab another soda from the kitchen when I heard them talking around the corner. They clearly thought I was still in the living room with my father-in-law, who had his hearing aid turned down anyway. He's such a joke in bed, Mom. I swear I have to fake it every single time. Then came the laughter. Not just any laugh, that specific kind that makes your stomach turn. Her mother's laugh was sharp, like they were sharing some inside joke at my expense. I froze mid-step, the fridge door half open, soda forgotten. At least you married someone with a good job. That's more than most women get, her mom said with this condescending tone that made my blood run cold. Your father wasn't exactly a stallion either, but he provided. That's what matters in the long run. Yeah, I guess. Just wish I didn't have to close my eyes and think about Chris Hemsworth every time. More laughter. It's like he has no idea what he's doing down there. I've tried dropping hints, but he's clueless. I stood there, finally grabbing that soda with a hand that suddenly felt numb, completely frozen otherwise. The world around me seemed to fade away. All the sounds in the house became distant under the weight of those words. My grip tightened around the cold bottle, but I didn't move an inch, afraid they'd realize I was standing just around the corner. Have you tried just telling him directly? Her mother asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. God number. You know how fragile male egos are. He'd probably sulk for weeks. Easier to just get it over with and move on with my day. I should have barged in. Should have confronted her right then and there. But something inside me knew this wasn't just about starting an argument. This was bigger. This was the kind of moment that changes everything in a relationship, the kind you can't come back from. So I just listened, my chest feeling like someone had replaced my heart with a block of ice. Men are simple creatures, honey, her mother continued. As long as you keep his routine the same and throw him a bone every now and then, he'll never even question it. Your father's been happily eating the same breakfast for 40 years. They're creatures of habit. Another chuckle. Another wave of disgust washing over me. True, and he is good for some things. He fixes stuff around the house without complaining, and he did get that promotion last year. The money's nice. See? Focus on the positives. No marriage is perfect. I silently backed away, went to the bathroom, and locked the door behind me. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, my face expressionless, but my mind racing a mile a minute. 6 years of marriage, 9 years together. And this is what she really thought of me. Not just that I wasn't good in bed, which fuck, that hurts anyone's ego, but the casual way she dismissed me as a person. The way she talked about me like I was some trained pet that she'd settled for. Here was the truth I never wanted to face. The woman I'd built my life around thought I was a joke, and her mother was teaching her how to manage me rather than respect me. I splashed cold water on my face, dried it off, and made a decision. I wouldn't confront her. Not tonight. Tonight, I would watch. Really watch. And I would see my marriage for what it truly was, not what I'd been pretending it was. I returned to the living room with a smile plastered on my face, the kind that doesn't reach your eyes. No one noticed. My wife and her mother came back a few minutes later, laughing about something else entirely. I sat there nursing my soda, really looking at them. At her. Perhaps for the first time in years. My wife was objectively beautiful. That hadn't changed. Long dark hair, green eyes, the kind of figure that turned heads. But as I watched her laugh with her mother, I saw something I'd been blind to before. A certain coldness around her eyes, a calculating quality to her smile. The way she would glance at me occasionally to make sure I was still where she expected me to be, like checking on a piece of furniture. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I answered questions when spoken to directly, laughed at the appropriate moments, played my part perfectly, all while feeling like I was floating outside my body, watching this sad, diminished version of myself perform like a trained seal. On the drive home, my wife scrolled through Instagram on her phone, occasionally showing me photos of people from high school or college that I didn't know or care about. I made the appropriate noises of interest while my mind raced. Earth to husband, she said, nudging me. You're quiet tonight. Just tired, I replied. Long week. She accepted this without question and went back to her phone. She didn't care enough to probe further. Why would she? In her mind, I was just the predictable husband who would never question anything, never surprise her, never deviate from the script she'd written for our lives. When we got home, I let Max out into the backyard while she went upstairs to get ready for bed. Our nightly routine, as predictable as the sunrise. I stood in the dark backyard watching my dog happily chase shadows, envying his simple joy. When did I become this guy? I whispered to myself. I splashed cold water on my face in the downstairs bathroom and took a hard look at myself. When the fuck did I become this guy? In college, I was captain of the lacrosse team. I had confidence, options, respect. I was the guy who pushed himself in the gym, who led training when others wanted to quit. I wasn't ripped like those Instagram fitness dudes, but I was solid. Broad shoulders, strong arms, the kind of physique that used to turn heads. More importantly, I had fire in my eyes, purpose, self-respect. Now, I was still in decent shape, but something had changed, not just physically, but in how I carried myself. Somewhere along the way, I'd started slouching, started avoiding eye contact, started saying sorry for shit that wasn't even my fault. My mind started racing through all the small moments that suddenly made sense. The way she'd turn away when I initiated sex, the eye rolling when I spoke, the jokes at my expense around friends, the constant dismissal of my opinions on everything from what movie to watch to what car to buy. There was the time I wanted to go on a fishing trip with my buddies for a weekend, and she made such a big deal about how selfish I was being that I canceled. The time I got excited about a potential job opportunity in another state that would have meant a big promotion, and she shut it down without even a discussion. The way she controlled our social calendar, the restaurants we ate at, the people we spent time with. I'd brushed it all off as typical marriage stuff. Happy wife, happy life, and all that bullshit the older guys at work would say. But now I realized I'd been played. I'd slowly given up everything that made me who I was, piece by piece, compromise by compromise, until I was just this shell of a man living someone else's idea of my life. I grabbed a towel, dried my face, and made a decision right there. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about me, and the man I used to be versus the man I'd allowed myself to become. When I went upstairs, she was already in bed, scrolling through her phone like she did every night, the blue light illuminating her face in the darkened room. "Do you respect me?" I asked suddenly. She looked up, surprised. Not guilty, not concerned, just surprised that I deviated from the script. "What? Of course I do. What kind of question is that?" There was no conviction in her voice, no weight behind the words. It was automatic, dismissive, like she was checking a box on a form. "Why would you even ask that?" she added, already looking back at her phone. "Just wondering," I said quietly. She made a small humming noise, already absorbed in whatever was on her screen. The conversation already forgotten. I stood there for another moment, watching her, before heading to the shower. As the hot water ran over me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Anger. Not the fleeting irritation that comes and goes in any relationship, but deep, righteous anger. At her, yes, but mostly at myself, for letting this happen, for becoming someone I didn't recognize, much less respect. That night, I lay awake while she slept soundly beside me. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to be the perfect husband, the promotions I'd chased to give her the lifestyle she wanted, the way I'd gradually given up my hobbies, mountain biking, poker nights with the boys, even my weekly pickup basketball games, because she always had something more important for me to do. I'd become a shadow of myself, a fucking doormat. And for what? For someone who mocked me behind my back? For someone who saw me as nothing more than a provider, a utility, a joke? No more. Starting tomorrow, things would change. I didn't know what that meant for our marriage yet, but I knew what it meant for me. I was going to find the man I used to be, the man who had self-respect, the man who deserved respect. The next morning, I got up early and went to the gym for the first time in months. I pushed myself harder than I had in years, feeling the familiar burn in my muscles, the sweat pouring off me. It felt good. It felt right, like I was reclaiming something essential that I'd let slip away. The guy at the front desk, Mike, did a double take when he saw me. "Holy shit, man! Thought you canceled your membership." "Just been busy," I replied, wiping sweat from my face. "Not anymore, though." After the gym, I stopped by this little diner I used to love before my wife declared it too greasy and insisted we stop going. Ordered the biggest breakfast on the menu and savored every bite. Simple pleasures I'd denied myself for too long. When I got home, she was in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone while absently stirring her coffee. "Where were you?" she asked, not even looking up. "Out," I replied, grabbing a protein shake from the fridge. That got her attention. I never gave one-word answers. I was always the one rambling on, trying to maintain some connection between us, filling the silence with nervous chatter. "Out where?" I opened the fridge, grabbed a protein shake, and shrugged. "Just out." Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't push it. I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out what was different. "You reek of sweat," she said, wrinkling her nose. "Are you going to shower?" "Yep," I replied, heading upstairs without another word. That was the beginning. Small steps at first, but significant ones. I started reclaiming pieces of my life one day at a time. I called my old college buddy Ryan, who I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Not because we'd had a falling out, but because my wife had made comments about how immature he was, how she didn't like his girlfriend, how it was weird that I still hung on to college friendships when I should be focusing on adult relationships. Gradually, I'd stopped calling him, stopped responding to his texts, until the friendship just faded away. "Dude!" he exclaimed when he heard my voice. "I thought you died or something." We laughed, caught up, and made plans to meet that weekend. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't check with the wife. I just made plans. At work, I started setting boundaries too. No more staying late to finish other people's shit. No more taking on extra projects just to impress the bosses. I focused on what I was good at: closing deals, managing my team, getting results. My regional director noticed the change immediately. "Whatever's gotten into you lately, keep it up," he said, after I landed the Peterson account that we'd been chasing for months. "You're on fire." I just nodded, but inside I was thinking, this is who I used to be. This is who I actually am when I'm not trying to make myself smaller to fit someone else's expectations. At home, the dynamic was shifting too. My wife started watching me more closely, asking more questions, even trying to initiate sex, which had become rare over the past couple years. I declined. "Not in the mood," I said, turning over and pretending to fall asleep while she lay there, shocked. I'd never turned her down before. Ever. No matter how tired or stressed I was, I'd always been available whenever she deigned to show interest. The confusion on her face was almost worth everything. Almost. "Are you feeling okay?" she asked, genuine concern in her voice for the first time in ages. "Just tired," I replied, the same excuse she'd given me countless times. She retreated to her side of the bed, and I could feel her staring at the back of my head, trying to figure out what was happening. Good. Let her wonder for a change. Over the next week, I continued my quiet revolution. Gym every morning. Setting up that meeting with Ryan. I even dug my old mountain bike out of the garage, tuned it up, and went for a ride on the local trails. I came back covered in mud and sweat, feeling more alive than I had in years. My wife was in the kitchen when I walked in, dirt-streaked and grinning. "What the hell?" she said, staring at the mud I was tracking in. Where have you been? Mountain biking, I replied, grabbing a Gatorade from the fridge. Forgot how much I missed it. Since when do you mountain bike? She asked. And I realized with a jolt that we'd been together long enough that she'd never even seen this part of me. I'd given it up before things got serious between us. Since college, I replied. Used to hit the trails every weekend. Well, you're getting mud everywhere, she said, frowning. And don't you think you're a little old for that kind of thing? What if you get hurt? There it was. The subtle undermining, the implied criticism, the way she infantilized me. I'd never noticed it before, or if I had, I'd brushed it off. Not anymore. I'll clean it up, I said, ignoring the rest of her comment. And I'm meeting with Ryan on Friday, by the way. Ryan from college? I thought you guys weren't close anymore. We're reconnecting, I said simply, heading upstairs to shower before she could respond. Friday night came, and for the first time in our marriage, I went out without giving her a full itinerary of where I'd be, who I'd be with, and when I'd be home. I just said, heading out to meet Ryan. Later, her expression was priceless. A mixture of confusion, irritation, and something else. Worry, maybe. Not concern for me, but worry that she was losing control. Ryan was waiting at our old favorite bar. Holy shit, he lives! He exclaimed, pulling me into a bear hug. Seriously, man, where have you been? We spent the night catching up, laughing, reminiscing about college days. He told me about his new job, his recent engagement to a woman who wasn't the girlfriend my wife had disapproved of. I told him, well, not everything. Not yet. But I hinted that things weren't great at home. No offense, man, but I kind of figured, he said, signaling the bartender for another round. You just disappeared? And when we did see you, you were different. Like, muted or something. Yeah, I admitted. I lost myself for a while there. Well, glad to have you back, he said, clinking his bottle against mine. Missed your ugly face. I didn't check my phone once the entire night. When I finally got home around midnight, my wife was sitting up in bed, arms crossed. Where have you been? She demanded. I've been texting you for hours. I pulled out my phone, saw the string of increasingly annoyed messages. Sorry, had my phone on silent, lost track of time. You can't just disappear like that, she snapped. I was worried sick. No, she wasn't. She was angry that I wasn't where she expected me to be, doing what she expected me to do. There's a difference. I told you I was meeting Ryan, I said calmly, starting to get undressed. We were catching up. Until midnight? What could you possibly have to talk about for that long? I paused, looked at her directly. Life, friendship. You know, normal stuff that friends talk about when they haven't seen each other in over a year. She blinked, thrown off by my direct gaze, by the lack of apology in my tone. Well, it was inconsiderate, she muttered, but some of the fire had gone out of her voice. Noted, I replied, heading to the bathroom to brush my teeth. When I came back, she was still sitting up, watching me with a strange expression. What's going on with you lately? She asked, her voice softer now, almost vulnerable. You've been different. For a brief moment, I considered telling her everything, laying it all out, what I'd overheard, how it had made me feel, how it had forced me to reevaluate our entire relationship. But something held me back, a sense that it was too late for that kind of honesty. That bridge already burned before I'd even realized it was on fire. Just making some changes, I said instead. Nothing major. She studied me for a moment longer, then nodded slowly, as if accepting this answer, even though she didn't quite believe it. I climbed into bed, turned off my light, and closed my eyes, feigning sleepiness, though my mind was racing. I felt her watching me in the darkness for a long time before she finally turned away. 2 weeks in, and she was starting to panic. I could sense it. She was used to controlling everything, to knowing exactly what I was thinking and doing. Now she had no idea, and it was driving her crazy. She started trying harder, making my favorite meals, wearing the lingerie that had been buried in her drawer for years, asking about my day and actually seeming to listen. Too little, too late. I continued reclaiming my life piece by piece. I called up more old college buddies and set up a poker night at Ryan's place. Started hitting the gym not just in the mornings, but sometimes after work too. Got back into martial arts, something I'd loved in my early 20s, but had given up when she complained it took up too much time. The more I reclaimed my old passions, the more I remembered who I used to be. The more I remembered, the angrier I got about what I'd allowed myself to become. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about me, about the slow erosion of my identity that I'd not just allowed, but actively participated in, about the countless small surrenders that had led me here. I started noticing other things too. The way she'd check my phone when I was in the shower. The way she'd casually interrogate me about my day, fishing for inconsistencies. The way she'd try to manage my new activities, suggesting that maybe I was overdoing it at the gym, that maybe one night out a week with friends was enough, that maybe I should focus on my career instead of distractions. Classic control tactics that I'd been blind to before. One night, after a particularly good training session where I'd finally gotten my timing back on the heavy bag, I came home to find her sitting on the couch, arms crossed. "Are you having an affair?" she demanded as soon as I walked in. I actually laughed. The idea was so absurd. I'd been reclaiming my self-respect, not looking for someone else to validate me. "No," I said, dropping my gym bag by the door. "Then what the hell is going on with you? You're never home anymore. You barely talk to me. You don't touch me." I set my keys down and looked at her. Really looked at her. "Why do you care?" That threw her. "What do you mean, why do I care? You're my husband." "Am I?" "Because for the past few years, it seems like I'm just the guy who pays the bills and exists in the background of your life." Her face flushed. "That's not true. Isn't it? When was the last time you asked about my day and actually cared about the answer? When was the last time you showed any interest in anything I care about? When was the last time you respected me as a man and not just as some fixture in your life?" She started to say something, then stopped. For once, she had no quick comeback. No way to turn this around on me. "I have a late meeting tomorrow," I said, walking past her toward the shower. "Don't wait up." There was no meeting, of course. But she didn't need to know that. She didn't need to know I'd been talking to a lawyer, figuring out my options. She didn't need to know I'd been looking at apartments. She didn't need to know anything about my life anymore. Because for the first time in years, my life was becoming mine again. The next day at work, I closed 2 deals back to back, riding the wave of clarity and confidence that had been building since that night at her parents' house. My team noticed the change in me. The sharper focus, the stronger presence in meetings, the way I'd stopped apologizing for taking up space. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it," my assistant said after I wrapped up a particularly tough negotiation. "You're on fire lately." I just smiled. What I was doing was remembering my worth. When I got home that night, later than usual, though there had been no meeting, she was waiting for me. Dinner on the table, wine poured, making an effort, playing the part of the doting wife. "I thought we could have a nice dinner together," she said, a forced brightness in her voice. "It's been a while since we really talked." I sat down, more out of curiosity than anything else. What version of herself would she present tonight? The concerned wife? The seductress? The victim? She chose concerned wife. "I feel like we've been disconnected lately," she said, reaching across the table for my hand. I let her take it, felt nothing at her touch. "I miss you." "Do you?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Of course I do," she exclaimed, looking wounded. "You're my husband. I love you." Words she hadn't said in months, maybe longer. Words that once would have melted me, made me eager to fix whatever was wrong, to return to the status quo of our unbalanced relationship. Now they fell flat. Empty syllables from someone who had referred to me as a joke to her mother. "What do you love about me?" I asked, taking a sip of wine. She blinked, thrown off script again. "What?" "It's a simple question. What do you love about me? Not what I do for you, not what I provide. What do you love about me as a person?" She stammered something about how I was kind, how I was a good provider. There it was. How I was funny sometimes. Generic compliments that could have applied to anyone. Nothing specific, nothing genuine, nothing that indicated she saw me as an individual rather than a role. I nodded, finished my dinner, and excused myself. "Thanks for cooking. I've got some work to catch up on." And that was that. No dramatic confrontation, no tears, no reconciliation. Just the quiet confirmation of what I already knew. She didn't love me. She loved the idea of me, the role I played in her life, the comfort and stability I provided, but not me. The next day, I signed a lease on an apartment across town. A month after that night at her parents' house, I'd secured an apartment, consulted with a lawyer, and moved some money into a separate account. Not everything, just enough to get by while things got sorted. I wasn't trying to screw her over financially. I just wasn't going to be left vulnerable. I was coming back from another evening workout when I found her sitting in the dark living room, waiting. "You weren't at a meeting last Thursday," she said flatly. "I called your office." I set my keys down calmly. "No, I wasn't." "So you are cheating." "I already told you I'm not." "Then where were you?" I sat down across from her, feeling oddly calm, like I was having an out-of-body experience, watching this scene play out from above. "I was looking at apartments." The color drained from her face. "What?" "I'm moving out." She stared at me like I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. "You can't be serious." I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Because of what? Because I asked where you were? Because I expect my husband to come home at night? I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. Number. Because I heard you. She blinked, confused. Heard me what? That night at your mother's house. About a month ago. I heard what you said about me. Recognition dawned in her eyes, followed quickly by panic. I don't know what you're... He's a joke in bed, Mom. I swear, I have to fake it every time. Ring any bells? Her mouth opened, then closed. And then there was something about closing your eyes and thinking about Chris Hemsworth, I believe. She swallowed hard. You weren't supposed to hear that. I actually laughed. Clearly, but I did. And you know what's funny? It wasn't even what you said that did it. It was how you said it. Like it was something you'd said 100 times before. Like mocking me behind my back was just a normal part of your relationship with your mother. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. And it made me realize something. You don't respect me. You probably never have. And I've spent years trying to earn the respect of someone who was never going to give it to me. That's on me. But I'm done now. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. But I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not guilt, not anger. Just peace. You can't just throw away our marriage over one comment, she said between sobs. It wasn't one comment. It was years of comments, years of eye rolls, years of dismissal. That one comment just helped me see it clearly. It was the wake-up call I needed to finally recognize the pattern. I stood up. I've signed a 6-month lease on an apartment. It's paid through next month. I'll be sleeping in the guest room until I move out this weekend. This weekend? She whispered. That's in 2 days. I nodded. I know when the weekend is. As I walked past her toward the guest room, she grabbed my arm. Please, she said, looking up at me with mascara running down her cheeks. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I can change. For a brief moment, I felt a twinge of something. Not regret exactly, but a kind of sadness for what could have been. But then I remembered her laughter, her mother's laughter, and the feeling passed. I'm not interested in fixing this anymore, I said, gently removing her hand from my arm. I'm interested in fixing me. What does that even mean? She asked, her voice small. It means I let myself become someone I don't recognize or respect, all in the name of making this marriage work. But a marriage shouldn't require me to erase myself. A partnership should lift both people up, not diminish one for the benefit of the other. I never asked you to change, she protested weakly. Didn't you? Every time you rolled your eyes when I talked about something I cared about. Every time you made plans without consulting me. Every time you dismissed my opinion or belittled me in front of others. Those were all ways of telling me I wasn't good enough as I was. She was sobbing in earnest now, her shoulders shaking. I didn't mean it like that. I didn't know you felt that way. That's the problem, I said quietly. You never bothered to find out how I felt, because you didn't care. The next 2 days were excruciating. She vacillated between anger, tears, and desperate attempts to convince me to stay. She brought up our history, our good times, all the reasons we were meant to be together. She promised to change, to go to therapy, to be a better wife. But the more she talked, the more I realized something. Not once did she actually apologize for what she'd said. Not once did she acknowledge how deeply she'd hurt me. It was all about her fear of losing me, not about my pain. And that, more than anything, convinced me I was making the right choice. Moving day came quickly. I didn't take much. Just my clothes, personal items, the few pieces of furniture that had been mine before the marriage. I'd come back for the rest once I was more settled. Max was the hardest part. I loved that dog like a child, but the apartment I'd found didn't allow pets, and I knew I wasn't in a position to properly care for him while rebuilding my life. So I left him with her, with the agreement that I could visit him regularly. Saying goodbye to him, seeing his confused expression as I packed my things, nearly broke me in a way that leaving my wife didn't. She didn't cry when I left. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a stony expression on her face. Pride or shock, I couldn't tell which. Maybe both. So that's it? She asked, as I loaded the last box into my SUV. 9 years together. And you're just gone? I paused, looked back at the house we'd shared. It had never really felt like mine, I realized. Always her taste, her decor, her rules. I've been gone for a long time, I said finally. I just didn't realize it until now. She didn't respond to that. Just watched as I got in my car and drove away, Max barking from the window as if he knew something momentous was happening. My apartment wasn't anything special, a 1-bedroom in a decent part of town, about 20 minutes from work. But it was mine. No pink throw pillows, no scented candles, no decorative signs with generic inspirational quotes. Just clean lines, comfortable furniture, and space to breathe. The first night alone, I ordered pizza and sat on my new couch. No one asking me what I was doing. No one sighing dramatically because I wanted to watch a game. No one making me feel like I had to justify my existence. It was fucking glorious. That first week was an adjustment, of course. I had moments of doubt, moments where I questioned if I'd overreacted. But then I'd remember how easily, how casually, she dismissed me to her mother, how she'd laughed at me. And I knew I'd made the right choice. Over the next few months, I focused entirely on rebuilding myself. I stuck to a consistent gym routine, dropped 15 pounds of fat, and started putting on muscle again. Got promoted at work after landing 3 major accounts in a row, started dating casually. Nothing serious, just remembering what it felt like to talk to women who were actually interested in what I had to say. My wife, soon to be ex-wife, tried everything. Tearful phone calls, angry texts, showing up at my apartment unannounced. How she got the address, I'll never know. Sending her friends to talk some sense into me. Even getting her dad to reach out, which was actually the only conversation I took seriously. I don't know what happened between you two, he said when we met, and I don't need to know, but I want you to know I've always respected you, son. That meant more than he could know. Thank you, sir, I replied. That means a lot. He nodded. She's a mess, you know. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? He asked, not unkindly. I thought about it. I'm sorry she's hurting. I never wanted that. But I'm not sorry I left. He studied me for a moment, then nodded again. You seem good. Better than I've seen you in years, actually. I am. Well, he said. Whatever you decide, you've got my respect. Always will. We shook hands. And that was that. The divorce proceedings moved forward. She fought it at first, refused to sign papers, tried to drag things out. But eventually, she realized I wasn't coming back. We didn't have kids, and I was fair about the assets, so it could have been a lot messier than it was. She kept the house. I kept my retirement accounts. We split the rest more or less down the middle. The lawyers worked out the details. Max was technically her property in the settlement. I moved to a better apartment once the divorce was finalized. A 2-bedroom with a small office space and a balcony overlooking the city. I bought furniture I actually liked, hung art that meant something to me, made the space completely my own. For the first time in nearly a decade, I was living in a place that felt like an authentic reflection of who I was. 6 months after moving out, I was legally single again. And for the first time in a long time, I was genuinely happy. There were still tough moments, of course. Holidays, birthdays, random Tuesday nights when a memory would hit me sideways, and I'd wonder what might have been if we'd met as different people, if we'd been able to truly see and respect each other. But those moments grew fewer and farther between as time passed. I focused on the future, not the past. On building, not regretting. On becoming the kind of man who would never again allow himself to be diminished for someone else's comfort. And it was working. I felt it in the way I carried myself, in the way people responded to me, in the way I'd stopped apologizing for taking up space in the world. About 8 months after I moved out, I met Megan at a charity function for the hospital, where she worked as a physical therapist. She was smart, funny, and refreshingly direct. When she was interested in something I said, she asked follow-up questions instead of nodding politely while waiting for her turn to speak. When she disagreed, she said so without making me feel stupid. She had her own opinions, her own life, her own passions, but she didn't use them as weapons to diminish mine. We started dating casually, then not so casually. I was upfront about my recent divorce, about the work I was still doing on myself. She appreciated the honesty and gave me space when I needed it, closeness when I didn't. For the first time, I was in a relationship that felt like a true partnership, not a performance or a power struggle. You know what I like about you? She said one night as we were making dinner at my place. You're so comfortable with yourself, so grounded. Most guys I date are either trying too hard to impress me or constantly seeking reassurance. I nearly laughed. If she had known me a year ago, grounded would have been the last word she'd have used to describe me. But she was right. I had changed, fundamentally changed. It wasn't about being more masculine or more assertive or more anything, really. It was about being authentic, about living intentionally rather than reactively, about valuing myself enough to expect others to value me too. That's what my ex-wife had never understood. Respect isn't something you demand. It's something you embody, both in how you treat others and how you allow them to treat you. And that realization, more than the apartment or the promotion or the physical transformation, was the real victory.